101 class.
In Fellowship Hall. This is a session for one session class for anybody interested in membership at UUCHV. If you're interested, simply fill out a yellow card or contact Reverend Josh. And I believe his contact information is on the order of service. Also on June 5th is our town hall. We'll discuss the budget and other things coming up at the annual meeting for our next year, 2022 to 2023. And that annual meeting is the following Sunday, June 12th. We'll vote on the budget and the Board of Trustees seats. If you have not paid for your auction winnings and you want to write a check and you want to know how much that is, just find me after service. For the most up-to-date information, please refer to our weekly e-newsletter and check our website frequently. The website is also the place where you can find contact information for our staff, Board of Trustees, and other congregational leaders. And please join us for conversation after the service. If you're present in the sanctuary, we'll go outside and hang out under the tent. And if you're watching the live stream, the link for the Zoom coffee hour can be found in the Saturday email and on our website. If you're just recently joining us and would like to receive our weekly e-news, please email us with your name and we will make sure you are added to the e-news list. We can also answer any questions you might have. Email us at uucroton@gmail.com, or you can fill out a yellow card and drop it in the collection plate. Please silence your cell phones at this time. And once again, we welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Hudson Valley.
I have one more announcement to make, and I didn't get it to Monica before. Sorry, Monica. We are lucky enough to say we have hired a contract minister half-time for next year. Reverend Daniel Lawler will be beginning with us on August 1st. Stay tuned for a bio and his bio and picture will be in the e-news and on our website very soon. We're very delighted.
Where is it? Sorry. It is my pleasure to introduce our worship leader this morning. This is the Reverend Terri Pahucki. She is the minister of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Stamford, Connecticut. Terri earned her Master of Divinity from Drew Theological School and Hartford Seminary and was ordained at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Northern Westchester, her internship congregation, in fall 2021. Please join me in welcoming Reverend Pahucki.
Good morning. Welcome to our worship. It is good to be with you all today. Let us circle round for freedom. Let us join together in a circle of belonging. Here on this day, there is a love holding us together, connecting us, even as we bring so much of our lives, both joy and sorrow, into this space. We begin worship this morning with these words from my colleague, the Reverend Teresa Soto. Bring your broken alleluia here. Bring the large one that is beyond repair. Bring the small one that's too soft to share. Bring your broken alleluia here. I know that people have told you that before you can give, you have to get yourself together. They overstated the value of perfection by a lot, or they forgot. You are the gift. We all bring some broken things, songs and dreams and long lost hopes, but here and together we reach within. As community, we begin again. And from the pieces, we will build something new. There is work that only you can do. We wait for you. Come, let us worship together.
Our chalice lighting words this morning are by Melanie Davis. If ever there were a time for a candle in the darkness, this would be it. Using a spark of hope, kindle the flame of love, ignite the light of peace, and feed the flame of justice. Now please join me in our unison affirmation. The words are printed in your order of service. Inspired by love, our mission is to seek our true nature, connect deeply and openly, and act for justice. Let us now bear witness to the joys and sorrows experienced in our community. If you have a brief yet personally significant joy or sorrow that you're willing to share, please come up to this microphone. Please speak directly into the mic so that everyone, including the people watching at home, can hear you. If you would prefer only to have a candle lit without speaking, please just stand and I will light a candle for you. I will start. I have a sorrow. My 94-year-old father-in-law took a fall the other night, fractured his pelvis in several places, is in the hospital now. He's doing okay, but he is 94 years old.
I have a joy. I'm very, very thankful to Caroline Staples, who's here periodically to visit us, because her parents were some of the founding members of our UU. She took the task of the poison ivy that's sticking out all around the entrance and up the pathways and personally got rid of it. Thank you.
I'm April, and I have a joy that I guess once COVID finally hit our house after 2 years of being at a pandemic, we've made it through, but it put things in perspective. So I hope that if you haven't had it, you don't get it. And then I want to light a candle just for the massacre in Uvalde, and words aren't going to do justice to the just immense grief that I felt all week, and then just the lack of comprehension of the disconnect between the priorities that so many people and leaders in our country, the disconnect that they have. So I can't, that's all.
I would also like to light a candle for Paul Yu in remembrance of the most wonderful person in his life, Gerald, who passed away 20 years ago. Paul is most grateful that his vibrant energy and love continue to live in Paul's heart and soul. I'll light a candle for all the unacknowledged joys and sorrows that we hold in the secrecy of our hearts, and one for all the people who have yet to find a place to share their joys and sorrows.
Let us take a moment to pray, to lift our hearts to the Spirit of life. O God of compassion and love of many names, hold all our stories, our joys, and our sorrows here in this sacred space. Today we cry out broken-hearted. There are no words. 19 lives lost in Uvalde, Texas. We cry out for the families who cannot embrace their loved ones today. Oh, how we rage against injustice, as violence has once again shattered our world. We ask, how long will this continue to go on? And we cry for all who have died by violence, for the members of a community in Buffalo, for the people of Ukraine, of Afghanistan, of Sudan, and all around the world. On this Memorial Day weekend, we remember all who have died in war. We cry out for each of their lives. O Spirit of love, help us to face tragedy with courage and turn our broken hearts into action. Help us to heal together, facing our world bolder than before. Here in this space, may we hold each other's pain. May we together bear our burdens. May we together walk toward peace. And when hatred dominates, may we stand with our lives in the primacy of love. May we find safety in the presence of those who listen and keep faith. May we be welcomed by a community of hope. And when confronted by despair, may we be nurtured by the renewal of life. Amen. Let us take a moment of silent meditation.
1875 theological treatise, Suffering, German liberation theologian Dorothea Surley examines the way that sufferings can knit human beings closer together and can draw us more fully into the process of loving. She uses the term apatheia, the inability to suffer, to describe the condition in which people become so dominated by the goal of avoiding suffering that it becomes a goal to avoid human relationships and contacts altogether. Isolation and apathy are forms of powerlessness. Both destroy, in Surley's words. We are destroyed most thoroughly by that affliction that robs us of any possibility of loving any longer. The capacity we need the most is the capacity to keep on loving. If pain and suffering tempt us to become isolated and apathetic, Surley argues, we must instead give voice to our suffering by creating a language of lament that might draw us into solidarity. The theology offered by Dorothy Surley echoes that of a rough contemporary, Hannah Arendt, who was a political theorist rather than a theologian. One of Arendt's most well-known assertions from her work, The Origins of Totalitarianism, is that totalitarianism is organized loneliness, and that the seed of that loneliness is isolation, the experience of not belonging to the world at all, which is among the most radical and desperate experiences of human beings. Therefore, resisting the isolation that breeds loneliness is not just an emotional, psychological, or even a spiritual act, but also a political one. The blogger and critic Maria Popova puts it this way: our insistence on belonging, community, and human connection is one of the greatest acts of courage and resistance in the face of oppression. Now please join me in singing our next hymn, number 134 in the gray hymnal, Our World is One World.
As Unitarian Universalists, we affirm that we are all a part of the interdependent web of life. This is our insistence on belonging. And yet, the threads of that web that have held so many of our lives together have become weathered and frayed. We have witnessed the world, our personal worlds, the larger planet, continuously falling apart. Even as it seems we are emerging from one crisis, we are waking up again to another. A global pandemic, the fall of Afghanistan, the invasion of Ukraine, the rapid acceleration of climate change, the threat here in the United States to women and LGBTQ rights, the continued onslaught of white supremacy and gun violence, innocent lives destroyed over and over and over again. Our Unitarian ancestor, the formerly enslaved Black abolitionist Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, declared in 1866 to a convention of white suffragists, "We are all bound up together in one great bundle of humanity." Her sentiments of interdependence echo through the speeches of Martin Luther King Jr., that we are tied together in an inescapable network of mutuality, a single garment of destiny. And today, through the poetry of Amanda Gorman, who in reflecting on the past few years declares that to love just may be the fight of our lives. Connection is not only moral wisdom, it is necessity for human survival. The world lives in our bodies and bones. Over the past 2 years, anxiety, depression, panic, loneliness, and isolation have increased. The social isolation and anxiety of the pandemic and surrounding world has impacted all of us, but especially the younger generation. The American Academy of Pediatrics has declared the state of children's mental health to be a national emergency, and suspected suicide attempts by adolescents have jumped 31% over the past 2 years. If we have learned anything from the global pandemic and all of this unraveling, it may be that we are, in fact, more vulnerable than we first thought. We need one another to survive. There are threads that bind us together that we so desperately need to reconnect and weave into new patterns. What writer Terri Tempest Williams names as a reassembling of our humanity. The political and the personal are interconnected, and I believe if we are to respond to the world, we must begin on that most intimate level of interpersonal connection. I know from my own experience that finding safe spaces to share my story has been life-saving. As a teenager and young adult, I struggled with anxiety and depression, and in my senior year of college, I found myself unraveling. I spent a week of intense therapy in the hospital, and as I look back on that time, I'm grateful for the people who got me through it, even if I couldn't see through the darkness at that time to the hands that were reaching out. But I'm grateful for those who led me to the supports I needed, to what helped me get well. It took me some time after that experience to realize that our life struggles are not shameful things to hide, but real truths to be shared that connect us together. After my father died in 2005, I experienced a second period of depression, and that time it was Unitarian Universalist community that brought me back together, thread by thread, helping me to reweave the story of my life, from grief and despair to new patterns of meaning, and simply to be there when I needed to fall apart. I've seen this pattern making over and over in our communities, in the ways that we reach out to support one another in times of need and just to hold space for each other's stories. I believe that holding space is a radical response to a world that floats too often on the surface and doesn't want to deal with emotional pain. A world that tells us to get over it, to move on quickly from grief and loss and despair, to bury our troubles and pick ourselves up. A world that says we are failures if we can't manage to cope with life on our own, that we simply need grit to succeed. This is the same messaging that tells soldiers with PTSD that they're simply not tough enough, or Black and Indigenous people that they need to overcome generations of trauma and continuing racialized oppression, and survivors of sexual assault that they need to forget and move on. But we are called to resist those messages and to tell a different story, one of vulnerability, one that makes space for our wounds, our pain, our struggles, one that recognizes that no matter what our struggles, we are already beloved and whole. We do this with the recognition that in openly working to heal our wounds, we rethread our lives to create new stories together, to gain wisdom and grow in empathy and compassion and service to others. Moving toward belonging also means making space for a shared lament. Memorial Day is one of those days that might actually increase isolation, as on one side, veterans hold stories, mourning lost friends, remembering the wounds of war, while on the other, civilians may celebrate too casually the beginning of summer. For 4 years, I participated in an interfaith Memorial Day service of lamentation and hope. This was a service that brought civilians and veterans together and created space for the sharing of veteran stories. The first year that I participated as a faith leader, I led a prayer of lament for all the lives lost. And I invited the congregation gathered to respond, "How long?" we cry out, "How long?" After that service, a veteran of Vietnam War approached me and said that that act of shared lament had been more healing to him than any other ritual he had experienced. As Dorothy Sherla states, we must give voice to our suffering by creating a language of lament that draws us into solidarity. Lamentation, has biblical roots present in the Psalms and the Book of Lamentations. In the Hebrew Bible, the Israelites crying out to God in the face of repeated injustice, asking, "How long?" Laments are howls of anguish and outrage, wails of sorrow in the face of unbearable suffering. Laments pierce through our numbness, indifference, and denial. They name the pain and bring it to light in a held community. If pain and suffering do tempt us to become isolated, then crying out in community binds us together. It is a ritual of connection, whether that ritual takes place at a vigil after yet another mass shooting, whether it takes place in a small group circle of shared stories, or in a crowd of people flooding the streets after yet another Black man is gunned down by police. Crying out together in shared spaces is declaring our mutual belonging to one another in the face of violence that threatens to tear us apart. We have seen some of that violence so up close in recent weeks. White supremacy is an act of intentional separation and division, and perhaps those assault weapons, the ultimate symbol of that isolation. But on the other side of that story, we find examples of belonging and connection. If we've read the biographies of the 10 people killed in a top supermarket in Buffalo, we might see how closely their lives were knit to others in networks of mutuality. Lives such as Pearl Young, a teacher in the Buffalo Public School District, who led a local food pantry for years. Or Kat Massey, a civil rights activist who wrote letters year after year trying to improve Buffalo's Black community. And so many others who cared for ailing family members. In fact, the supermarket itself was a symbol of community. And the contrast of those symbols, the weapon and the supermarket, is stark. As we heard previously, the words of Maria Popova, our insistence on belonging, community, and human connection is one of the greatest acts of courage and resistance in the face of oppression. As Unitarian Universalists, our work in community must be radical resistance as we respond to the spiritual crisis of disconnection to create spaces for true belonging. To be clear, belonging is not the same as sameness or conformity. It does not mean giving up who we are to fit in with a crowd. As social scientist Brené Brown writes, true belonging doesn't require us to change who we are, it requires us to be who we are. Our work in community must create space for the inner and the outer to come together, for authenticity, not perfection. This is radical reweaving. Radical reweaving may take physical forms of meaning too. Collectively, stitching and needlecraft are powerful and transforming symbols. They have the ability to reveal what has been hidden and to tell a new story. I have in my mind the image of the AIDS memorial quilt, which on October 11, 1987, was displayed for the first time on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., during the March on Washington for Lesbian and Gay Rights. Each square held the name of a person who had died from AIDS, lovingly stitched by family and friends. This was a collective lamentation. Today, that quilt contains 48,000 panels and is the largest piece of community folk art in the world. And that collective lament, that quilt, changed a story. It revealed to the public eye what many in politics wanted to keep hidden. It was the careful, delicate stitching of each person's story that mattered. The speaking of those names that made visible and changed the narrative of the AIDS epidemic. To rethread our lives, to share our stories, our pain, is to tell a new story, one that binds us and connects us together in belonging. We need to tell a new story that includes and holds our whole lives, our embodiedness, our emotions, our need for one another, our full humanity. Maybe you have stories or memories, threads that hold your grief, threads that have held you together. held your story for the world. Stories that are both metaphor and tangible gift, tangible and intangible weavings of our lives into a shared humanity. We are called to rethread the broken web of life with the golden thread of belonging, the one that shows us the line that weaves the world back together again, the one that travels through shadow and light, illuminating the loose threads waiting to be picked up by each of us so we can mend, repair, restore what has come apart. As we tell our stories, we weave the world anew. And I invite us to pay careful attention to who may be missing from our spaces. Who do we need to create healing space for? Let us think of and hold those people in our minds and reach out. We need one another to listen, to weave our stories together again into new patterns of humanity. Let us insist on belonging as we hold and carry each other into an ever-evolving, beautiful tapestry of our interconnected lives. In closing, I share with you the words of the Reverend Sarah Lammert, who was inspired by the teaching of Joanna Macy, who writes, "The web of life both cradles us and calls us to weave it further." And Reverend Lammert writes, "We create a web of life. This is finally the time to let go of that notion that we can live separate and aloof from one another. We create a web of life. This is the time at last that we can come home to each other, to our mutual belonging. Let every encounter be a homecoming as we step forward now for the healing of our world. The world is not going to be saved by good people or noble people. The world is going to be healed by ordinary people, like you and me, who are not afraid of pain, and who are not afraid of loving each other. May it be so." And I invite us to sing together our hymn, number 134, number 318, "We Would Be One."
Each week, we make an offering from the bounty we are blessed to enjoy. We do this in a spirit of love and generosity, aware that we have benefited from those who have gone before, those who in their turn gave generously. Our offering goes to support the work of love and justice undertaken by this community. Today's offering will also be shared with the Poor People's Campaign. Please read our e-newsletter or website for more information. You can make your donation in several ways. If present in the sanctuary, you may give cash or check in the offering plate as it comes around. You may also scan the QR code in your order of service. From your homes, you may make your donation via credit card or PayPal using the links provided in an e-newsletter. Please remember to give a little extra to compensate for the 3% surcharge. Or, if you prefer, you can always mail us a check. The offering will now be given and gratefully received. Please join me in the dedication of the offering. The words are in your order of service. May these gifts and the work of our hands and hearts give power to all we stand for as a community of faith. Please join me in extinguishing the chalice. The words are found in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Okay, that's my benediction. All right. We are bound in belonging to one another. Let us go forth honoring those relationships as we make real our interdependence. Let us nurture the life before us that all may mutually flourish. This is our work to do, to repair what has been broken, to reweave the world anew, one thread at a time, with love. Let us go forth to live into this promise together.
sure people want to say hi. Yes, yes. Thank you. No, don't run off.